Hey, welcome back to the Get a Grip on Lighting Conversation series. This is a special one, special release with Webster and Ron. They're talking about when smart home companies disappeared, leaving millions of customers with bricked smart devices. It's an interesting one that you got to check out. But before we do, got to talk Keystone, Keystonetech.com. That's KeystoneTech.com, the Retrofit Kings. And you know what else they do well? Is give you and your customer choice, wattage and color selectable product on just about everything. You can change the color easily, you can change the wattage easily, the lumen output, all built into a Keystone fixture. So make sure you check those guys out. Light made easy. And also Nailed, NAILD. This podcast is brought to you as part of that. And we have a big convention coming up in September. So be ready for that, September 13th through the 16th with the ArcLight Convention. We hope to see you there. For now, here's Webster and Ron.
All right, welcome everyone. This is a unique conversation that I wanted to have with Ron in response to a recent article I was reading about a rug pull situation from a manufacturer where they basically disappeared and all of the supporting hardware that they had under their listing stopped working. And this is actually a common theme in lighting controls that people have concern for lighting controls. And so that's why I wanted to kind of have a response to this in general, to kind of see if we can tease out what's going on here and how best to avoid this. And so, Ron, you read the article that I sent over regarding this, and basically, from a integrator standpoint, what is your the first response to that kind of issue?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? From an integrator's perspective, you hate to just laugh, but right, that's kind of what it is, right? Like
Right.
these are the things that should not happen, right? These are the types of issues people should not be experiencing, whether in a commercial space or in a residential space, right? This is part of the problem. This is part of why we need standards and stuff so that things like this don't happen. Systems shouldn't be entirely reliant on cloud and third-party devices to operate because things like this could happen at any moment.
Well, and I mean, just to kind of tease that out a little bit, in this scenario, it was so unique, so dependent upon that
Hmm.
connection that as soon as that connection vanished, everything stopped working. I mean, if I had like a smartphone, for instance, and it's connected to the cloud, I would imagine that if, for instance, Apple stopped supporting my iPhone or Android stopped supporting my Samsung, the Samsung would still work. I would still be able to do stuff with it. It just means that it
Right.
would over time degrade and be incapable of doing the newer, better things. But in
Yep.
this specific case, that's not what happened. Everything just locked up and people could no longer turn their lights on or off.
Yeah, which is crazy because I think about just the system I have in my own home, right? And while it is cloud connected, it also works completely independently, right? The devices work by themselves, standalone, and then connected through my home intranet. They all work just fine, right? They'll still communicate to each other and do everything they need to do. So it's fascinating that this company was 100% reliant on the cloud and didn't use Wi-Fi or some sort of central hub to at least let devices communicate.
But I mean, so as from a consumer standpoint, you can kind of understand why there's some hesitancy towards adoption of smarter technology because of the fact that they're worried that something like this might happen. And so, is there something that, from a consumer standpoint, I could do to avoid buying into something that may just suddenly disappear and then everything locks up?
Yeah, right. So from a consumer standpoint, that's tough, right? So
Right.
yes, there are things you can do, right? You can do your own research, right? You could consult with somebody who at least is in the industry and has maybe done some of this research already. Rely on consumer reviews, use trusted manufacturers and equipment, right? Part of the problem, unfortunately, is everyone wants a deal. Everyone wants to do something cheaper than the next guy. They want to find another way to do it. They don't want to spend that much money. And sometimes, unfortunately, when you're dealing with some of those less reputable manufacturers, things like this can happen, right? So you
Mhm.
really do, I understand that everyone wants to have some sort of connection to their smart home now. They want to have these devices, but you do, if you're going to take that deep dive, you do need to have some reputable manufacturers and electronics in place to sort of be the central hub of everything.
Well, and I think, the thing maybe a lot of people who don't have a short list of reputable manufacturers are going to ask, okay, how do I identify a reputable manufacturer? Because, for instance, this manufacturer we're referring to actually existed for a while. They
Hmm.
were they were able to put out millions of devices into people's
Yeah.
homes and then just vanished. And so, what's to say that the biggest names aren't going to do the same thing? How do we know what is reputable and what is not reputable?
Well, and that's right. So it's funny. I was thinking about this while I was in the shower, surprisingly enough, right? And I'm thinking, man, what would happen? Because I just happen to be playing music, because well, why not, right? Because I can. And
Right.
I'm thinking, like, wow, what would happen if that company with the big smile on their box magically disappeared? Like, all of my devices would stop working. Like, right? It would kind of be the same thing. They would just stop working. Not that I would expect that to happen, but it's possible, right?
Right. And so, I mean, that's the sticking point here, is that, we can say, oh, this is a reputable manufacturer, but reputable is subjective. We can't
Hmm.
say, okay, they have billions of dollars in revenue and therefore they're sticking around for the long haul. Additionally, there's another concern that has been growing, which is the software and the firmware back the platform that the manufacturer selects to use may stop being supported, and that's not their
Yes.
own choice. That is a
No.
third party. So, for instance, Microsoft Silverlight recently stopped being supported, and a lot of manufacturers who were using that as their platform to operate on had to basically revise everything and update. And in instances where product had already been installed and programmed and commissioned, um, they said it's going to cost you extra to upgrade to the new platform, because this was unexpected for us and it's a huge expense for us to just give this out for free. So, there's a lot of moving variables with that as well. And again, how does the savvy consumer avoid that?
Yeah, that's tough, because it's not even just that too. It's chipsets and components too have caused these sorts of issues lately, right?
Right. Well, and
Where
that's
manufacturers
creating the
have just had to
shortages.
abandon lines. Yeah, I
Right.
mean, right? We've seen manufacturers just up and say, we're no longer supporting this product. We're no longer selling it. And then what do you do when you get the call from the customer that has that product and has had it installed for 5 or 10 years, and now all of a sudden is looking for parts, and you have to tell them,
Mhm.
I've got X on the shelf and that's it. There's no one making it. And
Right.
if we can find it on eBay, we can help you out. But otherwise, it is tough.
So, I mean, tying it back to this whole conversation of standardization, I mean, if everything, for instance, if we had the form factor of a desktop and you could just rip parts out and replace them with third party parts, you know, if we expanded that metaphor to look at the building, if you can just rip out aux sensors and replace them with a different aux sensor or a keypad touchscreen, whatever, you know, pres arguably, this issue would not be as big,
Right.
because they would say, okay, well, we're not supporting this anymore. However, there are a plethora of manufacturers out there that provide equals to this that you can just substitute in.
Yep. Yeah. I
And
mean,
so
that would be ideal, right? For something like that to happen. Uh, and even if it wasn't that easy, right? Because I feel like that would be difficult. At least if they were using a standard protocol, right, for communication, you could probably dance around it pretty easily. Even if the devices didn't directly communicate, you could probably, if everything was using a standard protocol, even if it wasn't a simply plug and play device, I'm sure you could get
Mhm.
around it with some sort of a hub or some, right, some sort of other device that would allow that communication between the two systems.
And by standard protocol, we're not talking about just the protocol that's controlling the luminaires. We're talking
Right.
about the back end, which is the whole network system connecting devices to devices. You don't normally use DMX or Dolly to control devices. You use a
Correct.
different protocol, and a lot of manufacturers use a proprietary protocol to do this go between for devices, and then they spit out whatever protocol you need at the end of the chain to control the luminaire. There
Right.
are manufacturers that will go whole hog and they'll even have the proprietary protocol going from device to luminaire. But in a lot of instances, we'll see 0 to 10 or DMX or Dolly directly controlling the luminaire. But up to that that device, it's something else. And
Yep.
so we're not just talking about standardizing that protocol, the front end protocol. We're talking about the back end protocol as well. And
Yes.
but at the same time, from a manufacturer standpoint, then I am opening myself up to competition by doing that.
Yeah, I mean, yes, but isn't everyone already in competition anyway, right? Whether their communications proprietary or not, they're all
Right.
still trying to say why their system is better than somebody else's, or right, which new feature set they've allowed or
Right.
whatever. And there's still plenty of ways that one manufacturer can have advantages over another and still use the same communication protocols.
And so, I mean, from a standpoint of the argument that if I make everything open, people could come in and edge me out of the door. You know, it's kind of this balancing act between the consumer's perspective of networked lighting controls are just going to pull the rug out from under me at some point versus I want the cheapest product. And so, yes, okay, fine. There's going to be situations where the cheapest product is going to create issue within that because, if I, for instance, get, really fancy touchscreen, but then I have like cheap back end components going all the way to the light fixture, you know, that's I'm going to envision that the touchscreen is to blame for actually subpar parts running back to the luminaire.
Yep.
So, how does a manufacturer overcome that challenge? Because they can't just say, inferior parts because they're not in charge of that part of the system anymore. They're just in
Yeah,
charge of
right.
the
That
touch screen.
that part's tough, and that's where you need an integrator on your project, right, to make sure that things
Right.
like this don't happen, right? No, because it's true. The manufacturer can't control that, and these are the types of problems you run into where you get on the job site and everyone's pointing fingers at each other and saying, "No, it's your fault. No, it's your fault." And there needs to be that sort of objective third party who can walk in and actually troubleshoot the system beyond just the single manufacturer's equipment, right? And
Hmm.
go through and say, nope, we've identified the issue. Here it is. I brought in a completely different controller. The lights are doing the same thing. So,
So yeah, I mean, and I think this was something I was actually talking with somebody about recently when it comes to integrators. The person was saying, "Oh well, an integrator is an added cost to the project. Why should I get an integrator involved? Because I'm just blowing the budget out." And it struck me that actually it's not that you're adding cost to the project by getting an integrator. You're cheapening the project by not getting an integrator. In the HVAC world, for instance, integrators are a given. They need to be a part of the system. You cannot have an HVAC system that is intelligent by any means without an integrator. In the lighting world, it's backwards. It is that you can opt to have an integrator. And for the most part, yeah, okay, with DMX or Dolly, you could maybe stumble through and have success without an integrator involved. But as you get more advanced with systems, you really do need an integrator or somebody who's monitoring that system and making sure that it's installed and programmed correctly. And so it's in my mind, it's almost like you buy a computer without a graphics card and you stumble through success with that because you treat it like a typewriter. But then you want to do elevated features and you're like, oh, well, I have to buy a graphics card if I want to do that. So it's too expensive to do it that way. And it's like, you've been operating without a graphics card, which is not how a computer's supposed to operate, first of all. And second of all, now you're complaining that because you bought the cheap version for so long, you have this impression that it's that cost. That's the price tag for a computer. But really, you've been buying an inferior product for so long that you believe it, that's the
Yeah.
price tag. And so
Yeah,
I
and
mean, go ahead.
it's tough, right? So I do understand that argument about the added upfront cost, but you're right. If you look at like HVAC, right, it's very clear that if you don't have someone come in and balance the system and everything else, this room is going to work, this room isn't going to work. There's going to be no airflow, or you could do damage to the equipment if things aren't balanced properly. The airflow is incorrect. There's a lot of ways in HVAC which people really notice that. In lighting, it's a little tougher, right? The light turned on. What? It's fine. What's wrong with it? Light turned on, right? I mean, right? At the end of the day, that's
Right.
what a lot of people see. That's how they feel. What people don't see is what I often see is a lot of redundancy on the front end. So while people complain about the cost of an integrator, what they don't see is that manufacturer A, B, C, and D are all providing complete solutions for their package on a product or on a project. And then the next thing you know, the electrician's putting in 4 control systems, or they bought 4, even though they're only putting in this 5th control system, but each manufacturer sold them a control system. And that's where the integrator coming in and actually seeing all the bill of materials, going through and putting all these together and making sure all the communication's right and everything else is going to catch all of that extra stuff and say, hey, you don't need to buy all 4 of these. Go back to all these manufacturers, remove their services, remove these extra controllers, and look, all of a sudden there's the money for your integrator, or more in some
Right.
cases, right? Because they paid for all these things they didn't know about. And then unfortunately, a lot of times the end users don't even realize they paid for all this stuff. This stuff just vanishes into the ether and never to be seen again, right? I mean,
Right.
on a larger project that happens all the time.
Yeah.
So
Well, and the other thing is that, there's a lot of instances where in those multi-manufacturer systems, each manufacturer will also be providing their own technician doing the
yep,
work that an integrator would be doing. But the problem is with that manufacturer provided technician, they will only touch their own stuff. They will never
that's it.
transcend another manufacturer's stuff. And so if that contractor doesn't actually retain all techs for each manufacturer, which I've seen happen before, half the system won't work because
Right.
there's this Rube Goldberg machine of events going on. And if one of those intermediary components is not commissioned, you may never get your lights working, or they may work, but you'll realize later on that they're actually not doing what you wanted to do. I had this one system where 2 classrooms were being controlled together by the same system. And so the reports were coming in that there's a ghost in the system. The lighting was, behaving erratically. Nobody knew what was going on. It was like, well, because they're
Yep.
responding to the same signal and you didn't commission half the system. So,
Yep.
again, an integrator would be able to look at the big picture and say, okay, well, we need to do these products as well as these products, and we need to get them all programmed and set up correctly. Whereas in this case, the contractor did not retain the services of half the technicians that needed to come out. So, I mean, to kind of go back to the original topic at hand here, which is this concept of rug pulling, um, you know, first of all, having some kind of open standard would allow us to be able to overcome that issue to a degree. It's not going to fix everything, but it would at
Nope.
least allow these people who are right now literally in the dark to be able to go in and pop out components and replace them with other components, which would over time be a cheaper solution than gutting the whole system and replacing it with something else. Um, and then additionally, if an integrator were involved, if it was a big enough project, these we're talking residential projects here, which integrators could still be utilized for. But in a lot
Absolutely.
of cases, residential products are intended to be installed by homeowners. But an integrator could certainly coordinate a much bigger system. But if we get integrators involved in the process of these open standards, then they can also help kind of maneuver through basically the sea of product that would be available at that time, because it's no longer manufacturer A versus manufacturer B. It's keypad A versus keypad B aux sensor A versus aux sensor B. And so an integrator would be able to go, okay, well, this aux sensor here is going to be able to do what you're looking for. This aux sensor here, you're gonna be missing some features that you listed that you wanted. So, that's kind of the advantage there of where the lighting control systems should be, or would be more maneuverable, and where we're right now, the integrators are kind of going, can we all agree on something? Can we
Right.
please just say, I don't care what the protocol is, just give me a standard protocol that everything can connect to and communicate clearly, and we'll move on from there.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah. No, I mean,
a lot of the lighting controls integrators you included come from theater, where
yep.
theater has agreed, okay, DMX. I don't care how you layer it, whether it's ArtNet or streaming ACN, it's ultimately still DMX. We are still speaking that language. And because of that, you have the ability to go, okay, I want manufacturer A's opto splitter, manufacturer
Yep.
B's console. I don't care whose cable it is that's connecting it so long as it meets the standard. That's all there is to it for you. And granted, yeah, okay, fine. The anybody off the street's not going to be able to spec and design a DMX system without understanding DMX. But that's the whole point of being an expert on the product and understanding how to design and install the system. People go to you and say, okay, what do I need? Same thing that I would do with a computer. I wouldn't just randomly grab a computer that I find in a store and go, okay, this is all I need. I'd either do a lot of research so that I can build up my knowledge, or I'd go to somebody who knows what they're doing and say,
Right.
what computer do I need?
Yeah, I mean, and the biggest benefit too, right? Just to kind of stick in that theater world for a minute, is that I don't care what your budget is, right? I can propose to
Mm-hmm.
you a solution that's going to work regardless of your budget, and give you the infrastructure to grow into that as over the course of time as your sort of budget allows, right? So we see
Right.
this a lot with smaller schools, middle schools and stuff, where they're making an upgrade or they want to put in a new system, and the money's just not there. But we really focus on the infrastructure and making sure that everything's in place. And it doesn't matter, because I can go to any manufacturer and get that equipment. And it'd be amazing to be able to do that in the architectural world. And unfortunately, that's not the way it is, right? It unfortunately, and to sort of dive back to this residential issue, like, equipment shouldn't be cloud only dependent, right? I mean, that never should have happened, right?
Right.
That it's nice to have cloud access and have all those
Mm-hmm.
things, but everything should have some sort of central hub, or work independently, right? I mean, that some those devices never should have bricked like that. You would never expect that. Like, we're going back to the days of the BlackBerry here. Like, what's happening right now?
Right. So, I mean, yeah, and that kind of methodology would actually be identified a lot more clearly if there was a standard, because then people would say, whoa, you're deviating from the standard here. That's a risky choice. If a manufacturer decided to come into the theater world and said, we're not doing DMX anymore, we're only doing this new protocol that we came up with, which is so much faster and so much more capable, everybody would be like, you are rolling the dice. You're taking a huge risk right now, and you're
Yeah.
probably going to get bumped from the industry really quickly.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, it wouldn't take much. Yeah, it would be great to have those standards in place, to be able to just drop in anybody's stuff like that, drop in any manufacturer's equipment, be able to support clients better. I mean, the fact that I can walk into a theater from 20, 30, 40 years ago and drop in new equipment without
Hmm.
a second guess is amazing, right? The fact that we can do that, I can't do that in the architectural world. Most times I'm ripping out systems because I have no choice, because it doesn't work. I can't find components. There's no way to fix it. We're lucky enough if I can reuse the wire, right? That's the
Right.
biggest thing. Like, can I find a system that will allow me to reuse all the wire you already have in the walls? Maybe, Right.
Right.
It's tough. It
Whereas
is tough.
whereas with a theatrical system, you're talking about replacing literally one device that
Yep.
might just be old and therefore needing to be replaced.
Right. Exactly.
So yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Ron. Really appreciate it. And
No problem.
hopefully
Anytime.
we'll see some change in our industry eventually.
I certainly hope so. If only we could actually get it to happen. I don't know if it will. And I'm sure there's enough of the manufacturers that listen to this podcast. And if you have questions, we'd love to chat with you. So don't be so
Absolutely.
silent.
Or send us an email. We could always respond to your emails on this.
Absolutely.
There you heard it from Webster and Ron. Before we go, though, check out Keystone Tech. That's KeystoneTech.com. Wattage, color selectable product, everything you need in LED. They also have traditional stuff. Full lighting company, light made easy, Keystone Tech. And make sure you visit Nailed or think about signing up if you're not a member now, because you should be. We have an awesome in-person convention coming up. We have the best education courses, and the best people in lighting are all part of Nailed, so you should be too. Thanks for staying with us till the end. Until the next one.